Welcome to Lecture 12. Today we'll learn more about how to plan for a warehouse. In today's lecture, we take a look at what determines the sizes and numbers of warehouses required, what are the trade-offs between transportation and warehousing, as well as how to perform location analysis when setting up a warehouse. The size of a warehouse is often defined in terms of square footage of floor space, example 100,000 square feet, or sometimes in square meters, example 1,000 square meters. It is also important to specify the vertical height in addition to the floor area, as it gives a more realistic estimate of the total available space. A typical warehouse could have a height of 8 to 10 meters. The height of the warehouse directly impacts the type of storage systems and material handling equipment that can be used. The size of the warehouse required will generally increase as certain key variables increase. When size of products and number of products increase, when size of markets and number of markets increase, when there is variability of demand, when required customer service levels increase, and in the case of an inbound warehouse, when the required economies of scale of production increases. The size of the warehouse required will generally decrease as certain key variables increase. If the throughput rate is very high, it implies that inventory moves at a very fast pace and does not need to be stored for long periods of time. If the production lead time is very long, it is not necessary to maintain a large inventory of raw materials to support the production. Other factors which directly impact the warehouse size include the type of MHE and the type of storage systems selected. Both MHE and storage systems can range from fully manual to fully automatic and will be covered in our subsequent lectures. When the company needs to carry out value-added services such as labeling, repackaging, and light assembly at the warehouse, they will need to factor in appropriate facilities to cater to these requirements. Lastly, every warehouse will have their own stock layout and office space requirements to support their particular operations, be it low-volume local distribution or fast-paced regional distribution. In deciding on the number of warehousing facilities, 4 factors are significant. Firstly, duplication of safety stock across different facilities leads to an immediate increase in inventory costs. The associated warehousing operating cost goes up correspondingly. Transportation costs will initially decline as the number of warehouses increases, since the distances travelled to markets will be shorter. However, transportation costs will start to increase if there are too many warehouses due to combination of inbound and outbound transportation costs. The cost of lost sales or stock-out costs is the opportunity cost associated with sales lost due to inability to fulfill customer orders. Let's take a closer look at the trade-off between transportation and warehousing costs. When a company utilizes fewer warehouses, the inbound shipments from the manufacturing plants are in bulk and will be transported at lower costs. Each warehouse serves a larger pool of customers, and outbound small shipments will come at higher costs. When a company utilizes many warehouses, the inbound shipments from the manufacturing plants are in smaller volume and will be transported at significantly higher costs. Each warehouse serves a smaller pool of customers, and outbound small shipments over shorter distances will then come at slightly lower costs than in the previous scenario. As such, it is obvious that there are trade-offs between transportation and warehousing costs. When operating fewer warehouses, overall transportation costs are higher. When operating many warehouses, overall transportation costs are lower. To strike a balance, the company needs to analyze their total logistics costs in order to determine the ideal number of warehouses to operate while still meeting customer service requirements and minimizing operating costs. In order to decide on the optimum location for a warehouse, a company can conduct location analysis using the macro approach and/or the micro approach. In the macro approach, a decision is undertaken to position the warehouse in a specific location relative to the market. A market position places the warehouse near to the final consumers. This is usually required when high customer service levels are required and order cycle time is short. Order size is typically small. A production position places the warehouse near to the plant. This is usually required when there are a high number of products in the product mix and/or customer orders. An intermediate position places the warehouse at the midpoint between the final customers and the plant. The customer service levels are lower than for market position, but higher than for production position. There may be a more varied product offering being produced at several plant locations. The center of gravity, or COG position, takes into consideration the characteristics of different markets served, including demand, geography, and customer service levels. It then places the warehouse at a point that minimizes transportation costs for products moving between the plant and the different markets. If the markets served by the warehouse are equal in size, it would then be located at a point almost equidistant to all markets. More commonly, the markets served by the warehouse are vastly different in size. This results in the warehouse being located at a point nearer to the larger markets than the smaller ones. Let's take a look at this example of how to determine the COG. A logistics company wants to find the ideal location to set up a distribution hub in Thailand to distribute goods to stores in 4 major cities within Thailand. The expected demand in terms of number of truck shipments per month is provided. To start, the geographical coordinates of the 4 cities are plotted on a graph. The longitude or east-west coordinates are plotted on the x-axis. The latitude or north-south coordinates are plotted on the y-axis. Next, the x-coordinate and y-coordinate of the COG is calculated using the expected demand for each city. It is determined that the geographical coordinates of the COG are 101 and 15. These coordinates can be visualized on a graph. Based on these results, it would appear that Bangkok is the closest city to the COG and therefore an ideal location for the company's distribution hub. It is often also necessary to take a micro approach to location analysis. In this type of analysis, factors related to the country, business profile, infrastructure, labor, and the site are taken into consideration. Country-level factors will include overall political stability, government support for businesses, example ease of establishing businesses, tax incentives, etc. Cultural issues, example receptiveness of local community towards foreign businesses. Economic issues such as exchange rates and currency risk. The World Bank is a good source of worldwide governance indicators, such as this one, the political stability and absence of violence terrorism indicator. In this selection for ASEAN, it can be seen that the scores range from 10 to 99%, reflecting the diverse political situations across the region. Another commonly used indicator is the Press Freedom Index. Here it can be seen that the situation in Asia ranges from noticeable problems to the very serious. The second key consideration would be the business factors. The location of key markets, current ones, as well as planned future ones, will have a strong impact on warehouse location choice. In some cases, the location of key suppliers, especially for uncommon raw materials, which incur high transportation costs, may also influence a company to operate their warehouse nearer to the supplier. In some cases, a company could end up co-located with many of their competitors. For example, Singapore constructed the Tuas Biomedical Park to attract global pharmaceutical and medical technology companies. In addition to providing purpose-built world-class infrastructure, the government provided support in the form of tax incentives. Good infrastructure is vital to the success of a warehouse. In order to function, a warehouse needs to have stable utilities and telecommunication networks. The proximity and connectivity of hubs for various modes of transportation largely determine the ability of the warehouse to move goods in and out of the country. The Global Connectivity Index measures progress of each country in terms of Infocom technology investment, adoption, user experience, and market development. This has become an important index for evaluation of countries, as modern companies have come to rely greatly on internet-based systems for almost all aspects of their businesses. The next factor that is crucial to the success of a company is, of course, the labor factor. In some countries with aging populations, labor availability has become a very real problem. Escalating labor costs in more developed countries have resulted in shifts towards countries such as China, Vietnam, and in recent years, Myanmar. However, with increasing reliance on technology and automation, simply having cheap labor is no longer sufficient to make a country attractive to investors looking to set up new businesses. There's now a growing emphasis towards productivity, language, and IT literacy. There are many world indicators for labor factors. One of them is the global literacy rate. This graph shows that while North America, Europe, and Australia have literacy rates of more than 95%, most parts of Asia and Africa have far lower rates. Last but not least, there are sometimes site-specific factors to be considered. While the primary considerations are land and building costs, the size of the site and adjacent areas for expansion are also important. There may be zoning restrictions put in place by the government, which may allow only certain industries to be located in an area. A company may also wish to consider sustainability of the country. One way to gauge the sustainability policies of a country is through the Global Environmental Performance Index. The EPI scores countries across 10 categories covering environmental health and ecosystem vitality. These matrices provide a gauge at the national level of how close companies are to established goals. Once a list of relevant factors, key success factors or KSFs, have been established, you can assign a weight to each factor depending on how important it is to your company. You will then need to develop a scale for each factor and score each location accordingly. After multiplying each score by its respective weight, a weighted score is obtained. A final recommendation is made based on the highest point score. Let's take an example of Five Flags Over Florida, a US chain of 10 family-oriented theme parks. It has decided to expand overseas by opening its first park in Europe. It wishes to select between Denmark and France. Five Flags selected 5 KSFs, including labor availability, people-to-car ratio, per capita income, tax structure, education, and health. Weights were then assigned to each KSF and weighted scores were computed for each location. Based on the final score, France is the preferred location. With that, we have come to the end of Lecture 12.